Okay, I am in RStudio Cloud and I'm in the Psych 320 Research Methods space here. I have clicked on the intro assignment and I'm going to be working on this Pew survey assignment this time. So make sure that you're in over here on this panel that you're in the files section, or it might look differently if you're in packages or something else. So once you're in files, you click on this pewsurvey.rmd, and first thing I'm going to do is load this tidyverse set of packages. But what we're going to be working with this time is a data set from this Pew organization, which is, it's kind of like, as I understand it, a Gallup organization that does survey research. And so actually if you command click that link, it'll open it for you. I already had it open here, but you can see you will need to get a free account, and I've already got mine, but you just sign up for it. It's just a free account. And once you get that, so I say to go to internet, to go to datasets, and then internet, science, and tech, and then download this January 3rd through 10th, 2018 Core Trends Survey. So it says Internet, Science, and Tech, and then January 3 through 10 Core Trends Survey, and I'm just going to download that data set. And it will depend on your computer and where you downloaded it to, but basically what it should do is download a directory or a zip file called January 3rd through 10th, 2018 Core Trend Survey. And what you will need to do here is go back over to Files, and then there should be an Upload button here. And again, it will depend on your computer, but you will need to find that file that you just downloaded. So that's the one that I just downloaded right there at the top in my download section. And it will probably be a zip file. It might be a directory, but let's hope that it's a zip file for you like it is for me. And then I choose that and then press OK, and then it'll upload that data. And there it is. You can see in my files it got added there. And if you you can navigate in here. If I click on this directory, it shows you what's inside of that. It actually has some, make it a little larger here so you can see the names of these files. It has a number of documents, and this is the data, this .csv, which stands for comma separated values. It's like a spreadsheet file. But it has some other things as well, like it has the questionnaire, so you can see the exact wording that was used, and that will be useful. That's a Word document, so if you click on that, you'll be able to get more information about the survey. Okay, but let's come back to that. Yeah, let's go back to here. And I want to take a little bit of a detour into what's called R Markdown before we get into analyzing that Pew data. So Markdown is what's called a markup language. And it's a way of using a plain text document like this notebook, and adding some characters to format that text. So for example, if you want to put a word into italics, it's not like Microsoft Word or something where you can go up here and put it in italics. What you do instead is you surround that word with these asterisks. And you do one for italics, and you put it in two asterisks on either side of the word if you want it to appear in bold. And so what this will do is it'll leave it with the asterisks in the notebook, but then when you publish it on the web, it will appear in italics or in bold. And if you want to get a preview of what it will look like when you publish it, you can click on this preview button here. And so let's do that. Okay, and so we got this warning about the pop-up blockers. Let me adjust this so you can see it here. Now, notice that this is where it said symbols like the asterisks are used for italics and bold, but notice the asterisks are gone and the words themselves appear in italics and in bold. And so that's the way Markdown works. You use these symbols here and then you put your plain text in this Markdown language, and then when you publish it, it appears in the properly formatted fashion. And so what I ask you to do is put this text in italics, and so you just put the asterisk on either side, and then put the word bold in bold. And I guess it's the first word, the first bold. So I'll put that in between two asterisks. And so now when I preview it again, it will show that correctly. So that word is now in italics and the other one's in bold. Now, if you don't want the words to appear in italics or in bold, but you want to show the asterisks, like if you're showing someone what Markdown looks like, then you use these backslashes here. And so when we preview this, it will not appear in bold. Instead, it'll show the asterisks. So the backslashes there are what's called escapes the text. So it appears in its plain format and not in the Markdown format. And so it says this text will normally appear as a header. So if we look at that now, it says this is a header. And right, so right here it says this is a header. If we want to get rid of that, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the backslashes. And I think I could either put it there or I could also put it here. Either way, I think it would work. But now if we look at it, if we do this preview, notice it just says this is a header. It's no longer in that big font and bold, and now you can see those hashtags, those pound signs. Okay, and I say here's one that trips me up a lot when you have two lines like this. So if I were to go and preview that line one and then same line, it would be on the same line. So if we preview this. Let's see, where is that? Yeah, here. So it says line one and then same line. So notice it's on the same line, even though previously down in my markup, it was on different lines, and that might mess you up. You think it should appear on two lines, but it all appears on one line. And the trick is that you have to put two spaces and not one. And so I'll do that, and then when we preview it again, it should appear on different lines. To make a table, you use this formatting. You use this this vertical line, and then you can use these dashes to separate the headers from the content. And you can even do that, and it'll look really jagged like this in your text document, but it'll look perfectly fine once you publish it or once you preview it. And then the last thing I want to show you is that if you use these little colons next to the dashes on that second line, then you can left justify it, right, or center justify it with a colon on either side. So I say make a table with 4 columns. So I'm going to say column 1, and then I'm going to put my vertical line, column 2, column 3, and column 4, and I don't need one to end it. And then it says to center all content. So what I'm going to do I'm going to do this. And let's see, I need 4. So that's the 4th one. Okay, and then it says the numbers 1 through 12 in the cells. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go to the next line. It says have 3 rows. So whoops, and then 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so let's see what all that looks like when we preview it. Let's see if that worked. Yeah, there we go. So there's all my columns with all the numbers formatted properly and centered. And there's my line 1 and same line, but now they're separated because I put 2 spaces there. Okay. And I was going to mention here that the code chunks that we used previously already are examples of our markdown. It has these funny symbols with the backticks and then the R and the squiggle brackets and then the code. What I wanted to show you, so if we execute that, right, that's part of R. Now, we can do some things where, for example, this echo equals false in right next to the R in the brackets. What that will do is it will run the code and show the output 8 plus 7. It'll show the 15, but it won't show the code itself. So that will be suppressed. And I'll show you a little trick. If you click on this little wheel there, you can, it says show output only, and that's that echo equals false. And so you can select some of these things and it will put echo equals false and things like that in there without having to remember them. Another option is include equals false. And I say I want to put x equals 3. Oops. What did I just do there? It says put x equals 3 and put include equals false. So put a space, include equals false, and then run it. And now when I do that, if I go and preview it again, where would that be? Yeah, so you can see, you know that I typed it in, right? I put x equals 3 and put it into a code chunk, but I used include equals false, so it doesn't appear. So it's kind of just like doing a hidden kind of set of code that won't appear when you publish it. Okay, and I guess I had already done that. So here's one last little trick that I think is kind of cool with our Markdown, is if you use this format where you use the backtick and then R, now whatever code I put in here and then finish it with a backtick, I can make this R code. So even if I don't create a code chunk here, I can do things like 13, and then that little caret symbol is to the power of. So this should give me 13 squared. So let's delete that, and I have 13 squared equals R, and then 13 to the second power. And when I preview that, notice that it says 13 squared equals 169. It doesn't say backtick R 13 to the second power, right? So what it does is it just evaluates that R code, anything in there, and so you can kind of do little calculations, and then you can get your output but suppressing that code. So what I say is type 116 divided by 7 equals, and then add the R code, so backtick R, and then I'm just going to put 116 divided by 7 and then finish the backtick. And so now when I preview that, it says 116 divided by 7 equals 16.57, etc. Yep. All right, so when I say you can go and you can read more about R Markdown by going to that link. But let's go ahead and do the analysis of the pew data now. So the first thing I'm going to do is read in the data set. And I've got this data that I uploaded to this section of the files over here. And so this read CSV will take that data and put it into a variable called pew. It's a data frame called pew. And notice that, so it's in the way I have it here, it's in this directory called January 3rd through 10th, 2018 Core Trend Survey, and then the data is in this file here. And so that's what this slash does. I've got the directory here, the folder, and then I've got the file that the folder is in after the slash. And so if I execute that, it tells me that it parsed it, etc. And you might notice that under the environment here, it appeared a variable called pew. And it says to use glimpse to get an overview of the data. So I'm going to do that here and then run. And it's a big data set. So it's got 2002 observations or people who took the survey, and then it's got 70 variables, so 70 questions on the survey, I guess. And you can see it's got things like what state they were from, and then it's got a bunch of questions about the internet, and you can get, like I say, the details of the survey if you click on this this questionnaire here. A lot of these variables are questions like this that are like, are you male or female? And then the survey will code it as a 1 or a 2. So if we go back up here and find the variable sex here, notice that it's just a bunch of 2s and 1s for males and females. And so one of the things that we want to do first is we want to change that into a factor. And we use this as.factor command in R. And that will make it a little easier to deal with. And it's not really a quantitative variable. You can't say that females are 2s and males are 1s. It could be the other way around, or it could be 3s and 4s or some other number. The numbers themselves are not meaningful, and so this is a factor. It's a categorical variable, and we want to treat those as factors. And so what this will do is it'll mutate, so it'll change this variable here into a factor. And then this next line here, it's going to count how many of each there are. Okay, so it says we got a pretty equal, but we've got, which one was, we've got about 1,081 males, and we've got about 100 and, what is that, 160 or so fewer females than males. One thing that would be better is if instead of being 1s and 2s, if we recoded those 1s and 2s into saying male and female. And so that's what this FCT underscore recode, so it's factor recode, that's what that command does. So factor recode, and then what do we want to recode? We want to recode that variable sex, and then specifically what do we want to do? Well, we want to replace 1 with male and we want to use female instead of 2. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we're going to count them again. And now we see basically the same table as above, but instead of 1 and 2, it says male and female. Okay, so let's look at another variable called internet frequency, or INTFREQ, that asks how often the people use the internet. And I want to basically do the same thing. It says first just convert it into a factor. So I'm going to take pew, and I'm going to, again, that getting that pipe is Command-Shift-M. And I'm going to convert that into a factor. So I'm going to do I'm going to do mutate INTFREQ equals as dot factor, and then in parentheses that same variable again. And now what I want to make sure that I do is that I update the data set. So I want to do this mutation, do this change, and then put it back into the data frame. That will create kind of a permanent change to it. And then it says, and then count the levels. So then I'm going to say pew pipe, and then count INTFREQ. So let's see if I did that right. Okay. Again, what we want to do here, though, is these are pretty meaningless with just these numbers. So if we went to the code book, we can get what those numbers stand for. And what I did to save you some typing, I went ahead and put this in here. So 1 was almost constantly, 2 was several times a day, etc. And then there were 2 values for missing data. 8 was don't know, and 9 was refuse to answer. And so what I want to do is just call those both missing data. And so the way to do that is to just call it null. So I'm going to replace an 8 with basically with nothing, and then the 9 with nothing as well. And so what I'm doing here is what I did before with this factor recode. Male is 1 and female is 2, but now this is just a little bit longer. And notice that I put these on separate lines, and you don't have to do that, but I think it's a lot easier to read if you just hit return after. So if we had it like this before, if we just hit return after it, it will indent it correctly like that. Okay, so let's run that. And now notice we've got some nice labels there. That makes a lot more sense. I wanted to also show you that if we do the count on 2 variables, it'll give us what we call crosstabs. So we've now got sex and internet use. And so we can run that. And then we'll get for every group, for both for males and females, we can see how often they say they're using the internet. And this one actually goes on to the second page. Now we've got a little problem here. We do have this NA, which was, remember, the either refuse to answer or don't know. And we've got some of those. And so we don't really even need to keep those in the table. And the way to do that is I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to add in here, and I can add this either before or after the count. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to add this drop NA. So drop missing values out of this internet use variable, and then make sure you use that pipe so it'll keep the code going. Okay, so now when I add that drop NA, and all it does is it just leaves that out, and so now it all fits on one page nicely instead of spreading over to 2 pages. Okay, and so let's make some graphs of this. We're going to use this same kind of part that we used up here with the drop NA, but now instead of a count, we're going to do this ggplot. And so what this does is creates a graph a bar graph, basically, geom bar, with the proportions of male and female at each level of internet use. And so I'm going to ask you to modify this a little bit. So I'm going to come up here and copy this, paste it down here. And then it says add the line scale fill viridis, viridis D. And what that is, that viridis is a nice color palette that a lot of people like. And then I'm going to make sure you put the plus sign there to keep the commands going. And then I'm going to add another line. It actually doesn't matter where you put them. I didn't have to put it before that. I don't think that makes a difference. But I'm going to put another line, coordinates flip. So coord flip, and then with the parentheses there. And what that will do is it will switch the x and the y axes. So these terms here are on the other side. So let's go ahead and see if I did that right. So you can see the colors are a little different now, kind of that purple and yellow, which I think is the contrast is a little easier to see. And then it put the words here on the other axis. Now it says to make a new graph. I'm going to copy this. And what I'm going to do is in the parentheses of geom bar, I'm going to put position equals fill. So right in here, position equals and then fill in quotes. And let's look at what that does. Notice how now, so previously you could see how many people were saying, like a lot more people were saying several times a day or almost constantly than less than once a day, right? So those bars are longer. But the way that this appears is it allows you to compare the proportions of males and females at each answer more easily because the bars are the same length. So it obscures one finding, you know, how many people responded in each answer there, but it makes another one, the difference between males and females, a little easier to see. Okay, so that's done with position equals fill. And then another variation, let's go here, and it says in the parentheses of geom bar, put position equals dodge. And dodge in quotes again. And I'll show you what that looks like. And it says, I don't like the gray background in the ggplots, and to give it a white background, I'm going to add another line. So I'm going to put my plus sign and then theme underscore minimal. And you see, I think that looks a little better once we see it. So you see it's kind of a white background instead of a gray background. And then the other thing so what this position dodge did is it put the bars next to one another, like dodged right apart from one another, instead of the previous graphs were all one right on top of the other. And so this, again, makes it a little bit easier to compare who's, you know, if we look here, males are saying several times a day a lot more than females. And we can see that easily because they're right next to one another. Now here's another method. There's a command called facet wrap, and I'll show you what that looks like. It basically, what it does is it creates little side-by-side graphs for each of the variable specified in facet wrap. So one for men and one for women. And then the other thing that I did here, you don't have to do this because I've already typed it in, but I put these labs or labels, and it will give you a nicer y-axis label, x-axis label, and it also give you a title for the graph. So the title is frequency of internet usage, and it just puts that at the top, and then x and y gives you a little bit nicer labels there. And then you can see with this facet wrap, it creates two separate graphs, one for men and one for women. And so that's another way that you might graph you know, two groups like that. Okay, so then I say you also might want to combine some of the levels. You can do some tricks with these factors. And so this is the last thing I wanted to show you. You can use this factor collapse command. And so let's say we want to simplify this. Instead of having all 5 of these different responses, maybe we just want to divide into 2 groups: people who use the internet a lot and people who don't use the internet a lot. And so what we might do is collapse. So in this case, we're going to collapse these 3 groups, once per day, several times a week, and less than once per day, into this one group called daily or less, and then put these other 2 into this more than daily. And so that's just another way we can do things to simplify it a little bit. And so now you notice we have, I called it internet use simple, and we just have it into these 2 groups. And so I say now recreate the position equals fill graph from above, but with internet use simple. So with just these 2 graphs. So let's do that. And it was the fill one, so it was up here a little further. I think it was, yeah, it was this one here. All right, that was the one that had this fill line, and that's the one it's asking me to do. So go back down. I'm going to paste that, but now I'm going to use this internet use simple. So all I really need to do is add that to the X designation. Okay. And so there you could see, it looks to me like the men may be using the internet a little more than the women, right? Because the more than daily, the purple, which is the men, are a little bit larger compared to the daily or less. Okay, so then I will save this assignment for the next video.